Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 54 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on what is clinical psychology and why is it needed. And it is the 4th of October 2020 as I record this, and it is a Sunday because I want to be honest straight away. This is the first time I've actually recorded this episode. It was Friday. I didn't plug in my mic. So today I tried to re-record again. Turns out on my recording software on my laptop, I didn't have it set up going to this microphone. But today everything is fine, and if not, I'm just going to cry, to be honest. Alright, okay, so let's move on to today's episode. So moving on to the psychology news section, and even though I'm really a bit disappointed in myself that this is the third attempt, and how I'm doing it, I feel really, really happy. Okay, so let's move on with it. So as always, moving from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. So the first one is, astronauts need a decent night's sleep too. So it reads, as I read this post, I'm struggling a little to put words onto the page. I didn't sleep well last night, and my tiredness has taken its toll on my ability to concentrate. But at least I'm sat at home and not, say, in control of a massive hunk of metal filled with electronics and fuel hurtling towards space at thousands of kilometers per hour. Was a new study in Scientific Report has found that astronauts need to get enough sleep too, and when they don't, their performance suffers. So to be honest, as I've said for the past 3 recorded attempts, this isn't too surprising because whether you're a astronaut, a mechanic, a writer, author, podcaster, university student, psychologist, etc., we all need sleep, to be honest. And it doesn't matter what profession, we all still need a good night's sleep, otherwise our performance will suffer. I forget what study I've mentioned in my biological psychology book, but what it said was that was that a study of these nurses, and these nurses changing to a night shift, so they didn't get enough sleep for the first night at all, and their performance really, really reduced. So that's just something to think about. So please get a good night's sleep, all of you. So another one is, even imaginary barriers can prevent kids from cheating on tests. How can you discourage kids from copying each other on tests? You can always use a simple frame to separate them, or even a ruler to draw an imaginary line between their desks. When these behavioural nudges are techniques are used in new research, they significantly reduce cheating amongst 5 to 6 year olds. This shows that, open quote, even seemingly unremarkable features of children's environment can nudge them to act honestly, close quote, the research writes. This I think is really, really interesting because that's what I read that. I thought, really? But that's ridiculous. How could that work? But it just goes to show that, well, children are still developing, and to be honest, they believe a lot of stuff. For example, like Santa Claus, that is arguably a nudge technique because it makes children behave good and children believe it. So I guess it's not that different. So to be honest, if you've got really, really younger children, don't feel bad to use nudge techniques, as long as it doesn't harm them, of course, but still though, I think it's really interesting. So another one is, to be honest, in the other 2 attempts, I've done 4, but we're just going to do 3 because the fourth one was, about coffee cravings can play havoc with your memory, and that's just saying that new research from, some 2017 research has shown that if you drink coffee, it is a bad idea to skip it for a lecture or whenever you need to, when you need to memorize something because it can make you overconfident in actually how well you remember stuff. So moving on to the last one. So selfish and combative people don't actually get ahead at work. And this is what it says. In popular culture, there's an idea that a lot of successful people are, not that nice. From someone Gerald Ross to The Apprentice, there's an antinomy of bad bosses and aggressive success stories in film and television. The message seems to be that to get ahead you need to ditch the niceties and think about number 1. And I actually disagree with that more than anything, because specifically in the writer community, networking, helping other people out, being nice to people is the best way to help yourself, because then you start to form relationships with people, then they're more likely to help you out if you ever need it. So going back to the article, this stereotype might not reflect what's really going on. However, in a new longitudinal study published in PNAS, a team from the University of California, Berkeley and Kobe College tracked individuals over a 14-year period, looking to see what became of those who were more disagreeable. They found that selfish, combative and manipulative people have no real advantage at work, not because there are no benefits to such behaviour, but because its positive and negative impacts cancel each other out. So to be honest, there's not a lot to say, except try and be nice, try and help other people, and just try and be the best person that you can be at work, because not only are you going to help yourself, you're going to help other people, you're going to make like a few more friends, and when it comes to like decision time and who they're going to promote, they might be more likely to promote you because you're the one who can create a better working environment and all that positive stuff that bosses are like looking for. So I hope you enjoyed the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So moving on to the personal update. So as I already told you on the last one, there was this episode's been a slight nightmare, but everything seems fine now because I just had a quick look at the psychology news section. But putting all of that putting all of that aside, to be honest, there's actually not a lot to say in the personal update because I was doing a lot of fiction and some work for my non-fiction for authors brand. But there's only two really relevant things to say today. Well, I'm back at university now, but I'm not back because I'm still at home and everything's done online. But it was just a quick introductory talk. But I finally got access to my module outlines, and to be honest, they sound really, really interesting. So I'm looking forward to the lectures. You can almost guarantee that I'll mention them in the personal updates and I'll comment on them. So you'll be learning a few bits there, and also if anything. Yes, and if any of these topics are really interesting, then I'm more than likely to turn them into actual podcast episodes because they're going to become chapters in the books anyway, at some point. And then the only other thing to say and the only other thing that I wanted to say to you all was in relation to the podcast mistakes and everything that I've made, something that I really want to emphasise to all of you is just be kind to yourself. None of us are perfect. I was really annoyed at myself for making these basic podcast mistakes, and also I didn't feel like I had, and also I got a bit annoyed at myself that I didn't feel like I had an as productive week as I should have. But we all have bad times. We all make mistakes. Just please be kind to yourself. We're all human. I think if none of us made mistakes, then what would we laugh or joke about later? So just be kind to yourself, because if you're really hard on yourself, you will affect your mental well-being, and I really don't want that. So I hope you found this really, really short personal update useful. And as always, you can always contact me by emailing me at connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley, and you can also leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/blog. And the sponsored product for today's episode is my brand new clinical psychology book, which is available on all major ebook retailers, and the paperback and large print version are available on Amazon. So here's the blurb. Clinical psychology is filled with interesting topics about human behaviour, and there's a massive job market in the world for clinical psychologists. This book provides you with a great introduction to clinical psychology, whether you're a student or a trained professional. So, do you want to learn about clinical psychology? Do you want to learn about models of therapy? Do you want to learn about formulation and more? If the answer to these questions is yes, then this is the book for you, as this book explains a wide range of clinical psychology topics in an easy to understand way. By the end of this book, you will know what clinical psychology is, why it's important, the different models of therapy and how they're used, the roles that are in clinical psychology, and much more. So by today, start learning about this amazing topic. As I really, really enjoy this book because even though it's a rather short book by other standards, it's still packed with such great information, but it's not dense, which I actually really like about it. So if you're interested in clinical psychology, then you should really enjoy this book. So that is Clinical Psychology, available in ebook and the paperback form. Ebooks are available in all major ebook retailers like Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, Apple Books, and more. And you can get it for free at your local library if you request for it. And the paperback and large print versions are available on Amazon. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about what is clinical psychology and why is clinical psychology important? So I really, really enjoy this topic, and hopefully you will too. So it is actually quite a difficult question to answer because clinical psychology is such a varied and quite a diverse profession. However, clinical psychology is a subfield of psychology that focuses on mental health, and research has shown that clinical psychology, not unexpectedly, has shown that clinical psychology can aid recovery and it can alleviate people's psychological, and it also helps them with their difficulties, for example, depression, anxiety, and many other mental conditions. And the important thing to note about clinical psychologists and what makes them different is that they can apply psychological theory and research so that they can understand and help people with their difficulties. And something else that I quite like about clinical psychology is that everything pretty much comes back to 4 points. So it comes back to assessment. So when you're helping the client, you're assessing them to find out like what can be done in the future. There's a formulation which we will talk about in a few episodes' time. Then there's treatment, and then there's evaluation and treatment. And the source for that is Jones and Harley 2015. And building upon that, I know I mentioned earlier that clinical psychology has a lot of roles, and to be honest, it can be quite complex, but only because if you ask two clinical psychologists what is clinical psychology, they will give really vague answers because there's so many different roles. For example, clinical psychologists can work in forensic, schools, a health setting, and they can also work with people with learning disabilities, adults, they can work with retired people. So to be honest, there's so much choice within clinical psychology, and that's what I'm really interested in, because you can literally go almost anywhere with a clinical psychology. So that I think is really, really interesting. And the entire point of clinical psychology is to help empower people to feel better by learning to tolerate, accept, or manage their psychological distresses differently, or by changing how people see themselves and their situation. So if you read my clinical psychology book, it goes through that in a lot more detail, and as you go throughout the book, you can see it a lot more clearer. But all that you need to know now is that clinical psychology is about helping people and helping to prevent them from suffering with their difficulties. So now we're going to move on to why is clinical psychology needed. So there are lots of reasons why clinical psychology is needed, and one of the main points is that stress is part of everyday life, and stress, if it gets high enough, can lead to a lot of negative outcomes in your life, and it can also cause a lot of psychological distress. So for example, in recent years, difficulties with mental health have become a growing public health concern, with it being estimated that 1 in 6 people in the past week have experienced a common mental health problem, with mixed anxiety and depression being the most common conditions in Britain, with 7.8% of people meeting the criteria for diagnosis. And in England, 4 to 10% of people will experience depression in their lifetime. So that's really high, and that's such shame. So the entire reason why clinical psychology is needed is to try and help those people and prevent it from harming their life. Help like just these people can get a better, more fulfilled life. And the source of that was mentalhealth.org.uk. And another reason for why clinical psychology is needed is because of mind, and this is a mental health charity that's all about refocusing the perception of mental health. Right now it's seen as something you don't really talk about, and it's a very taboo subject in some circles, and that can be really bad for mental health. And Mind found that 1 in 4 people will experience mental health difficulties this year, yet the shame and the stigma around mental health can actually be as bad as the difficulty itself. And this is something I want to highlight. If you think mental health is negative, then your perception might really, really be harming someone, actually preventing them from getting the help that they need. And to just wrap up today's episode, I just want to quickly mention that the impacts of mental health, because when you have a mental health condition, though, it does not affect just the person. In fact, it affects the family and the society. And one of the reasons for that is that if your friends or family or a family member, with someone with a mental health difficulty, but then because you don't know how to help them, you feel helpless yourself. You feel awful because you can't help them, but you really want to. So that makes it very difficult. And then finally, from mentalhealth.org.uk, the poor and more disadvantaged people in society are disproportionately affected by common mental health problems in their lives. And that's another reason why structural inequality and differences in socio-economic status are massive factors when it comes to determining if someone will develop a mental health problem. It's that's just something to think about. So, I hope you enjoyed today's episode on what clinical psychology is and why clinical psychology is so needed. Please check out my clinical psychology book. Ebook is available on all major ebook retailers, and you can get it for free at your local library if you request it. And the paperback versions are available on Amazon. So, have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.